This is the best wilderness survival I've ever watched. They smoked and grilled so much meat, they ate until they were stuffed every day. They grew sick of crocodile meat and caught a huge fish instead. The grilled fish was so tasty, they couldn't stop eating. The survival experts made it feel like a vacation. Meanwhile, Gary's group, they were chewing on some fatty meat in the morning, but ended up vomiting before they could enjoy it. Maybe it was too much fat. Amber griped that he wouldn't stop eating. With food scarce and teammates hesitant to eat, he gorged until he puked. It's generous we haven't fed you to the crocs. Yet, minutes later, he's grilling more meat. Max was baffled, and Amber called him nuts for eating non-stop even when full, saying it was just wasting food. Meanwhile, Matt's group, they were already facing a food crisis, and both Ryan and Matt were infected by the sea rat. The fish traps they set up yesterday yielded nothing. The crocodile bait was still untouched, so they resorted to hunting with bows and arrows. They noticed signs of sea rat activity nearby. This meant there was a sea rat nest nearby. For Matt, catching the sea rat was not just hunting, it was also about revenge. The sea rat lived in this tree hole, and they planned to smoke it out. Riley believed today was the day to avenge the two men. Catching the sea rat would help with their food shortage for a few days.
Going through this whole vegetative area, there's a nutrient den somewhere. We figure out where he's hiding.
At the captives' camp.
That's his hole right there.
I would almost gamble.
Yeah, it is.
Let's go to bet he's in this hollow part right now, just hunkered in there. We blow fire in that hole.
Yeah. We'll carry that fire over on a palm frond leaf or something.
Yeah.
They had a rough start, but now they caught a crocodile and were eating grilled meat every day. They had more meat than people. Even though Jeff was constantly smoking crocodile meat, there was still a lot of meat left to process. They were basically grilling meat 36 hours a day. Using smoke to dry the meat helps preserve it better. The remaining meat attracted many flies. Jeff's grilling rack was already packed with grilled meat. He kept adding charcoal under the tree hole to cook. Stephen was equally busy, but seeing so much meat, Jeff was very happy inside. This must be the most natural smokehouse I've ever seen.
Morgansport right here. I'm literally going to let it smoke here all day long until all this smoke is going to cure that and turn it into jerky.
We are working as fast as we can this morning, basically turning our shelter into a meat smoky. As you can see, the meat in here, it's freaking wonderful. Already is starting to have a nice crust to it. Smoked flavor of our meat. Can carry this energy level through an
Jeff
entire 60-day
found a crocodile egg on
challenge.
the ground. Eating it would grant him magical powers, but with no women around. So Jeff didn't dare to eat it. With so much fresh meat now, he didn't want to try this strange thing. If Gary were here, they might use crocodile eggs to bait him. Smoking the meat takes time, so they just have to wait. Matt's group is crafting tools to catch the sea rat. They brought charcoal, vowing to smoke it out. They've started a fire in the tree hollow and are watching the exit closely. As soon as the sea rat appears, Matt's ready to shoot it with an arrow. How can they be sure the sea rat's home? The tree hollow's smoking like mad, but there's no sign of it. Ryan keeps poking the hole with a stick, almost setting the tree on fire, but still no sea rat. Matt thinks it might not be home. They search nearby for other exits. Meanwhile, Snyder checked his fishing traps daily, but had no luck. Why would he test the waters with a tiny crayfish? Does he really think just hanging something there will get him a fish? He's fishing in deeper waters with a hook. Snyder set up 6 fishing traps, hoping these hooks will bring him some food. Every few hours, he checked the traps and surprisingly caught a catfish with crayfish bait. What's going on? Did a dead fish bite the hook, or did the show crew set this up? Snyder snagged a lifeless catfish and hurried back to the shelter to celebrate. That night, he enjoyed it as a midnight snack. But with winter coming, fishing will get tougher. Snyder is currently scraping by, meal to meal, without a steady food supply. A steady food supply is crucial for long-term survival. Meanwhile, Jeff's group is so well fed they don't even feel the cold in their shelter at night. They hear a crocodile sound. Stephen thought it might be a big carp, but then wondered if the crocodile was seeking revenge. They were too frightened to leave the shelter. Stephen had a realization, perhaps they had eaten the crocodile's wife. The crocodile continued to roar outside. Stephen, who had eaten someone else's wife, was afraid to go out and look at the shelter, and the water outside was freezing so badly that they quickly set the fire on fire. If the croc does come for revenge, at least there's enough fire to roast it. They were too scared to sleep last night. Now it's day 19. At Gary's camp, the grilled meat is going bad. They've been smoking it for 6 days, but it's still not drying out. Clearly, they're doing it wrong. They figured out that one crocodile won't last because preserving meat here is hard. Ambo decides to use its foot as fishing. When they have meat, they skip fishing. They only fish when they're nearly starving. There are lots of catfish, and Umbwa is great at catching them. He thinks it's his job now to fish and feed Gary and Maximum. Over at Matt's group, they've decided to set traps to hunt the sea rat. Why bother with sea rats when there are fish to catch? I doubt they even know how to fish with worms. Ryan made a small trap. If the sea rat comes this way, it'll get caught. But why would it just walk into the trap? Ryan plans to set the trap on the sea rat's path. They've set up one trap here, relying solely on it to hunt. The success rate is way too low. Over at Jefferson's group, they recall the crocodile's roar from last night, sounding like a dinosaur. The crocodile came out last night searching for a mate, unaware its partner was hanging on their salt rack. Jeff estimates it was 3 meters long. Definitely a man-eating monster. Now, with the weather getting colder, fishing and hunting will become more difficult. But they still try to store more food for winter. Steven uses the crocodile's innards as bait, hoping to catch its mate for food. While setting the crocodile trap, something moved in the water. It was a big turtle. Over at Snyder's group, he had a meal of meat yesterday, and since he's not hungry now, he plans to explore other areas and finds deer tracks. If Snyder manages to hunt a deer, they'll be set. He guesses the deer come here to drink water. That's a good sign, but on his way back, he spots a huge spicy strip nearby. It's the biggest one Snyder has seen so far. You can't waste food that comes to you. A stick is all it takes to deal with it. Today's meal is sorted. Even a cut-off tongue can still bite, so don't toss it. Pocket it and dispose of it properly. Meanwhile, at Gary's group, a deep-sea monster swims in the river while 2 ancient turtles sunbathe. Gary spots them and plans to swim over and ambush them. He's tired of eating crocodile meat. If he can catch these 2 turtles, it would be a nice change. But catching these turtles isn't easy. They may look slow as pigs, but they can move really fast. Gary tries to sneak over, but a fish startles him from behind. Unaware, Ambo calls out, thinking Gary's just swimming. Max sees it all. Before Gary can approach, the turtles scatter. Gary likely wants to whip Ambo with his belt. But something even scarier happens. A crocodile appears near Gary. Actually, there's no need to be afraid. Some crocodiles are friendly. Sometimes, it might just want to be friends with you. But Ambo thought this was a terrible idea. If Gary got hurt, he'd be a burden to the team. Gary might have found it funny, but his teammates weren't happy with his antics. By day 20, the temperature had plummeted. Jeff felt the cold, despite their inadequate shelter. Even though they had lots of meat, they still checked the fishing traps daily. Steven would dive in to fix the traps without a second thought. He had no fear left. Meanwhile, Gary's group faced a grill malfunction. Max noticed the wind direction changing. Winter would be much tougher. They took advantage of the remaining time to gather more wood. Food is scarce in winter, and they needed wood to stay warm. Soon, they had collected a lot of wood. By nightfall, they were sleeping around the fire. Max's breath was visible, indicating not just the cold weather, but also that his breath was pretty bad. Matt and the others were freezing too. It was tolerable with meat, but being half-fed daily was tough. Jeff's group had the worst shelter, despite having lots of food and drink. Snyder's shelter was the best, but he was very lonely. Even with many furs, it was still cold. Ambo got to cut a piece of wood while sleeping. Although he wasn't burned, his foot got hit. Clearly, Ambo had to bear everything alone tonight. On the 21st morning, Ambo ate grilled meat. His foot, hit by wood last night, wasn't hurt, but it looked really dirty. Over at Snyder's place, he now had 3 furs. He was doing well in all aspects. Except he hadn't gotten much food. The weather was only getting colder. Without food, surviving the winter would be tough without food. Snyder's main goal was to hunt a deer for its meat and warm skin, and the meat would last him a long time. Even before hunting, he started building a smokehouse. Logically, every team had caught a crocodile by now, so Snyder should be next. Meanwhile, Matt's group drank water after waking up and checked their hunting traps, hoping to catch a sea rat. This was Ryan's first time setting up traps. When they got there, they found a sea rat in the trap. Matt shot it with an arrow. They finally got their revenge. This sea rat was enough to feed them for several days. It's clear that their hunting skills are top-notch. A sea rat this big is almost like a small wild boar. If they stretch it out, it could last a week. Meanwhile, Enbo is fishing daily for Gary's group. Their fish meals depend entirely on his catch. Each time he fishes, he stands in the water for hours. Meanwhile, Gary found a piece of driftwood on the shore and wanted it for firewood. To Enbo thinks Gary is a real troublemaker, but Gary believes in pushing the limits as long as it's not deadly. He stood on a dead tree gathering branches while Amber fished nearby. The tree was on the verge of breaking, but he kept going. Damn, this is hilarious. Did this guy secretly get paid by the production team? He's really nailing the show. He just took a bite. Gary must be thinking, this score is worth risking my life for. Even Marks would think Gary's lost it. Could this sea rat have a resurrection armor? Amber expressed her concern, ostensibly for Gary's safety. In truth, he was more concerned that if Gary got knocked out, their team wouldn't last until day 60. Winning the prize meant keeping Gary safe. Gary was speechless for a moment. He hadn't felt any pain from his fall earlier, but after Amber's comment, he started feeling it. Meanwhile, Jeff's team. They woke up freezing and started collecting wood for warmth, which took Jeff's team by surprise. They rushed to finish their shelter, piling grass on the roof. When it was finally done, they had to collect wood, but while sorting it, Jeff hurt his foot on the muddy ground. It's easy to get twisted up. Hopefully, it's not too serious. Matt is already dealing with the sea rat meat. They're about to have their second barbecue feast. These 2 legs are enough for them to have a full meal, and the offal cannot be wasted, and it is also very delicious to roast it on an iron pot. They skewered the meat and smoked it, and they ate the offal first, and they kept the smoked jerky and ate it slowly, as a sign of respect for the river rats. Ryan ate his balls first, even though they smelled a lot, but they were very delicious after being hungry for so many days, and Matt and Ryan toasted the balls. Eating it grants you magical powers. Don't ask what kind, just know they're awesome. Riley, no one will save you if you shout your throat tonight after eating the liver. You will eat the roast leg. Do they finish this meal of rat meat in the sea? With things going so well, Matt's confidence is high. He wonders if the others are still alive, unaware they're thriving. In the evening, it's freezing here, and Amber's feet are numb. Sleeping on the ground in winter is awful, especially for Jeff's group. Their shelter is very open. Even though the fire is burning big, it still feels very cold. Suddenly, Jeff hears a noise. The shelter suddenly collapses, revealing a hole that doesn't seem to matter much. While others sleep at night, Snyder decides to go hunting at night, something I've never seen in all my years of watching survival shows. Despite the freezing weather, Snyder grabs his bow and arrow, ready to hunt a deer, regardless of the cameraman's opinion. He opts to stay here all night, hoping deer will come to drink by morning. Animal calls echo around him. The sky starts to brighten. He waits quietly for the deer to appear. A squirrel is nearby, but he's not interested. This guy is really tough. Over at Jeff and Steven's, their shelter has half collapsed. The cold wind kept blowing in all night. Living in such a shelter is no different from Snyder spending the night outside. Their group has the most meat. In the morning, they can have jerky for breakfast, which gives them enough energy for other tasks. Building a shelter isn't hard. I don't know why they don't make it better. Steven plans to use small sticks to fill the gaps and top it off with palm leaves. Meanwhile, Gary's group complains every morning about the cold nights. Their shelter hasn't been improved. The weather is getting colder, and their beds are piled with firewood. They sleep on the ground each night. In the morning, Amber's feet are numb, likely because it's too cold for proper blood flow. This can't go on. She goes to the shore to check the fishing traps, but the line is stuck. She has to get in the water to fix it. Gary notices and comes to help, trying to retrieve the hook, but Amber thinks he's just giving his family a bath. Turns out he caught a fish. It's likely Gary used his family to fish. Their group is facing a food shortage. Catching a catfish now is definitely a good thing. So far, Amber has caught 3 catfish. Why don't other contestants know how to fish? Gary is very grateful for Amber's active fishing. Only this way can they live better. They save the catfish heads to bait alligators. Before eating, Amber sets up new fishing gear. Setting up new fishing gear is crucial for a steady fish supply. Meanwhile, Snyder has been on watch all night, but he didn't see any movement. The night watch was in vain. Snyder is really tough, staying up all night in the cold wilderness. On the way back, he heard a squirrel's call. A little squirrel was doing exercises on a tree. Snyder aimed and took a shot. He missed by just a hair. Snyder returned to the shelter and recounted his night. In short, it was freezing and lonely. Meanwhile, Matt's team planned to use fishing gear early in the morning. They finally devised a solid plan, but just as they were about to fish, Matt spotted a deer nearby. He rushed back to the shelter for his bow and arrow, took aim, and fired. He believed he hit the deer, but it had already bolted. Now, there's no proof. Whether he hit it or not depends on Matt's story. If he's modest, he'll say he hit it. If he's boastful, he'll claim he shot the deer into the air. Now they're planning to search for the deer they hit. If they find it, they'll have a feast of venison. They saw deer tracks on the ground. The deer must have passed through here. Sarah found some blood on the ground. Just a drop. You could say it's from the deer's period for all I care. I won't believe it until they find the deer. They followed the blood trail to search. Matt was already planning how to cook the meat, but finding a deer in the vast forest was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Meanwhile, Gary's team, they were already roasting meat in the shelter when Amber saw the fishing line move again. Gary checked and caught another catfish. This was really lucky. They hadn't even finished the last fish, and now they had another one. They couldn't finish all the fish. Today, they achieved fish freedom, all thanks to Amber. Max felt guilty because he hadn't caught anything. But Amber offered to share his catch. That night, Max returned the favor. After roasting the fish, they ate it bite by bite. The fish was tender and juicy, full of fat, much tastier than alligator meat. At this moment, it started to rain again. Jeff was still building the shelter. Rain didn't just mean getting wet. It also meant the next 2 days would be freezing. With the shelter unfinished, the nights were unbearable. The one good thing for Jeff's team was their ample meat supply. They kept adding leaves to the roof. Staying warm isn't the priority. As long as it keeps the rain out, it's fine. Thunder rumbles, and soon it begins to rain. Snyder is collecting firewood. He has to gather enough before it rains. Right now, Snyder's fire is the weakest. Unable to lift, the girls left. Meanwhile, Matt's team is still searching for the trail. The rain will wash away the deer's blood. This just complicates things more, and Matt's hopes for a venison feast are fading. Meanwhile, Steven's team is still working on their shelter in the rain, despite the cold. They're not scared at all. After 22 days, their shelter still lacks a bed. No wonder they turn into popsicles at night. Matt's team hesitates to return, still wondering where the deer might be. They've been searching for hours, and now it's raining again. They're already freezing, and their search will be fruitless. Meanwhile, Gary's team huddles in their leaky shelter, avoiding the rain. Their shelter still leaks, and Amber's feet are numb from the cold. They could have built a better shelter, using dry grass to make a bed. Why don't they do that? The rain stopped around 9 at night. Snyder is sitting in his shelter, not sleeping. He feels very bored alone in this villa. He hasn't eaten anything for days. Around 2 in the morning, sparks reignite the shelter. Snyder is sleeping like a log. This is bad. He thought this time the shelter would definitely burn down. But Snyder noticed it again and quickly got up to douse the flames with water. It seems fate wants to toy with him rather than let him die. But rather to toy with him. On the 23rd day, while fetching water, Snyder saw a crocodile sunbathing on the shore. Now he drinks water daily, uninterested in the crocodile. The wind is fierce. Returning to the shelter, he found the fire out. He had to start the fire again. Losing the fire was a huge blow to him. Now Snyder is living worse than a dog. This swamp is really hitting him from all angles. Matt's team is out again, looking for the injured deer. If they can find it, they can live well. On their search, they found a spicy snack sunbathing. Spotting a spicy snack in such cold weather is unusual. It's very spicy and needs careful handling. Matt used a stick to pin its head down. Riley quickly finished it off. Matt grabbed the snack, ready to use it as hot pot seasoning. These guys eat everything except chicken heads and feet. They eat a ton of everything else. Ryan even thought it tasted good. The tongue they cut off shouldn't be thrown away casually. It's best to pocket it and sort it properly at home. Even though they didn't find the road, discovering a spicy snack was a real win. At least it counted as a meal. They cut out the heart of the spicy snack, and Riley ate it in one bite. Maybe the $100,000 prize is really too much. Otherwise, they wouldn't be putting in so much effort. Riley, who had never tried a spicy snack before, began eating everything. With this snack, they decided to stop searching for the road. Meanwhile, after some radio exercises, Amber's foot got better on Gary's team. Max kept adding mud to the walls to waterproof the shelter. But no matter how well it was built, the entrance was as big as a zipper, so how could it keep warm? Amber said his foot no longer felt swollen. He thought it was a good sign, but Gary disagreed. The swelling hadn't stopped, it was just being contained. It was limiting it. Now Amber only thought about fishing. To save his leg, the doctor came to check on him. The doctor told him it was a routine check, but the condition was already severe. During the check, Amber's foot had no sensation. His teammates were stunned by the news. The doctor warned it was serious, but Amber refused to quit. The doctor couldn't persuade them, so he contacted the show producers. If Amber had to leave, the team would lose their fishing food source. Given the circumstances, they'd probably have to quit. The producers, worried about Amber's safety, called him out for a talk. The producers decided to force Amber to withdraw. Gary and Max didn't know what to do, but Amber was very reluctant to leave. After all, they were halfway there. The $100,000 prize. He couldn't believe it was slipping away. Gary was heartbroken too. They couldn't make it to the end. Amber had put in so much effort to get food for the team, and his exit was truly heartbreaking. His teammates reassured him, saying he hadn't lost, just missed the prize. Amber left with them, singing "One Life, One Love." But he felt very upset inside. He really didn't want to leave. So, what surprises will the contestants face next? Stay tuned for the next episode.